In some of the work I've been doing on analyzing narrative, I've been sort of defining stories as meaningful connections across time. And I guess I've sort of been defining meaningful connections as the kind of connections that our conscious minds create that add a new order of meaning to events that may have no meaning inherently on their own. So my sort of thesis has been that humanity's narrative worldview emerged to help us better survive and thrive in the world, and that experiencing the world narratively had sort of this unintended side effect of giving our lives meaning. Uh, the difference, I think, between how that works in our real the stories of our lives as we experience them and the fictional stories that we tell is that, in real life, the meaningful connections that make up the stories of our lives happen sort of organically. We don't normally know what's going to be meaningful in advance. We tend only to sort of identify the meaningful moments of our lives in retrospect. Whereas narrative artists, I think, kind of intuitively understand what components a story needs to include to make the artwork a meaningful sequence of events. And I've sort of been referring to that process as a narrative syntax. So the decision of what to include, what to leave out, and the best way of presenting that material so it can be most easily understood by the audience. And since, sort of generally speaking, artists create their sort of fictional stories out of whole cloth, in each moment of the story, they have the foreknowledge of what is to come, which lets them sort of craft each scene so that it can be meaningfully connected to one that came before or one that comes after, to weave sort of a story that will inevitably be meaningful to the audience only in retrospect, I guess.
Yeah. So there really has to be an audience in some
Yes.
ways. If you're an artist, it kind of requires an audience, or does it? Or to me, that sometimes gets in the way of being creative when you're always thinking about the audience that who you're, presenting to. What do you think, Michelle, about this idea? You're
Well,
you're a creative artist. You produce theater,
mhm.
musician.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this idea of meaning and creating meaning, the narrative artist creating meaning, and then the audience, tell me if I'm getting this right, Emmett, the audience accessing that meaning only after it's been created by the artist who has this narrative in mind.
Oh.
And
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I think there's also there are also different edges to this because as far as meaning making goes personally, individually, in my own personal story, I think I've known that I've had, going along through life, I've had these certain narratives that I've told myself about who I am and what I'm doing here and, what's meaningful in life. And then things happen to disrupt all of that. And I find myself, um, first of all, without any of that meaning that I had to hold on to, because I believe that this meaning that we create for ourselves, it gives us like things to hold on to in life, big ideas and small things, just to get through the day, to go and take a shower. And when giant things happen and your life explodes, that explodes all the meaning that you had made up until that point. All those neural pathways are gone. Like, say if you lose somebody who's really important to you, they're all gone. And so I look at it two ways, like personally, as a person, as a human, how do I make new neural pathways, and which ones do I want to make, and then as an artist, what is the story that I want to tell, um, through that meaning that I'm making? So it's so, I don't know, I have I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle.
The artist is a person who creates stories, well, first, who creates stories within themselves, tells a story. Let's say we're talking about a playwright, somebody that's creating a play or uh, something traditional. Um, they put the story out there. They really work on, and I'd like to hear more from you, Emmett, about, I think you said narrative syntax. So they put it together, they show it to an audience, and then the audience creates their own meaning. So
Yeah,
they're actively creating their own meaning of the story that you've worked on. That and then along the way, as you're saying, what creates the story, Michelle, sometimes is an unexpected event comes up.
Mhm.
Your life meant one thing, suddenly there's a loss, a tragedy, a windfall, something disrupts that. But that's just for the story, I would think, that eventually gets told.
yeah. I think that's true that, the artist has what the story that they make means to them, and then each audience member has how, the meaning that they take from it. And, no two of those people ever really have the exact same experience, but in a way, artists are sort of trying to like reverse engineer the process of the way that we find meaning in the world. Try to craft the narrative in such a way that it can be meaningfully understood by an audience. And yeah, I mean, death certainly is something that I think, obviously, it's meaningful in part because of how profoundly that can feel, the loss that can be felt. But I also think it comes with such finality and can seem
And it's
so.
not, sorry to interrupt, but not just how the loss is felt, but how it chemically changes your brain pathways. No, your
Mhm,
neuronal
mhm.
pathways are changed.
That makes sense. And it, I don't know, sometimes it seems so inherently senseless and arbitrary. I feel like that's something in particular that humans need to bring meaning to, which is sometimes why a lot of artists use that as inspiration for other work, because that's some of the best ways for us to process it.
Well, yes, and being and doing a lot of work in as a grief activist now, I see that there's so much pressure on people in our culture to not have these feelings, to not express deep, dark, bad feelings like grief because number one, they're not productive, and number two, they feel bad. But the more that we do that, the more that it stays unexpressed. And
Michelle, I don't know if you even know where you left off. That's
oh,
okay.
I don't
You're
know.
Yeah, you were talking about the neural pathways get changed
Yeah.
by life events. Life events change the chemistry. You feel differently.
Mhm. Well, not just feel differently, but your brain is trying to, your brain makes these shortcuts for people or things, events in your life that you live with, and then when they're gone, your brain doesn't know what to do with them. So it's not just a feeling. I just want to get that across.
Hmm.
Right.
Um, um, so uh, and maybe it has something to do with art making too at the same time. I know for me, my whole art trajectory has changed since my life got turned upside down through so much loss. And I know that's happened to others. About using it as fodder for art, I think I think another way to look at that is that as an artist, I am privileged to have uh, tools or access to expression in in order to express some of this, like unholy kind of energy that had that keeps descending, and we all receive energy like that, and how do we express it? So maybe part of my calling in this world is as an artist to find ways to not only express my personal grief, and by grief I mean, grief writ large, not just people losing people, but losing anything: identity, home, pets, jobs, youth. um, and if I can do that, if I can find a way to heal the individual, it also helps to heal the collective. And so maybe that is also be considered the audience. So, but it's a difficult path to traverse, because who wants to have to go through all that growth? Nobody. And
Right. Yeah.
and then, as an audience, and if you haven't done that, if you haven't had the privilege of experiencing that, all that loss and pain, do you want to also immerse yourself in it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right. And telling a story about loss can help us process it. But in theory, yeah, the reason we create art is so that an audience can experience it. So in a way, if we can, if it's something that they can identify with, it's something that they can meaningfully connect with, then maybe it can help others too. And I think you're right. Like I'm a person who, for better or worse, is really good at compartmentalizing things and of avoiding processing things, even the things that I really need to. And when I am in therapy, when I do have a therapist or I'm in therapy, what I often say for myself, that the importance for me is that it forces me for that hour a week or whatever to go to places that I wouldn't go on my own. And I think telling stories about loss, where you're digging into those parts of myself that I try not to engage with a lot of the time, that can have a similar value.
Yeah, the way I think about my audience now is so different than the way I used to think about it. I feel that I've been given this gift, and I want to be able to find ways to share it and enlarge my audience, which is an audience of people who see the value in looking inward, and exposing maybe lies that we've been telling ourselves, i.e., stories, narratives that we've been telling ourselves. Like, for instance, I grew up in a dysfunctional alcoholic family system. And of course, we had so many things, stories that I told that were created, that I helped co-create in order to survive. And now these things don't work for me anymore. So how do I untangle them? How do I untangle those stories? And so I can get to the real meat of what's really important and who I am. So part of my work is about doing that work on myself and helping others, as I mentioned, and also guiding us to be able to feel safe, have a brave space to tell our own stories. And what I love to do is not just use words. And I know there's many ways to spin a narrative, but using somatic work is really important to me, using the body and using the voice beyond words. So I think they all coalesce somehow, and that's the beauty of it all, because I don't know the answers. I mean, there's so much room for mystery that I have to leave out there.
Yeah, that makes me think of like there was a stand-up special by, I think it was Hannah Gadsby, called Nanette, and there was something that she said that was I'm probably paraphrasing, but it was essentially, we are the part of the story we focus on. And I was jumping off something you were saying earlier, Michelle. Like we have these narratives about the meaningful moments in our lives that we think define us, and we have the things that we've done that we're like, this is emblematic of the kind of person I believe myself to be. And then we also have the things that we've done that we're sort of a little more ashamed of, that, we, think of that as an outlier. This is not who I'm aspiring to be. But we did both things, right? And it is a story, really. you're determining the context of what those things are, saying this is me, this isn't. You could just as easily say that this is you,
Right.
and it's an interesting process, you know, sorting all that out, I guess.
It is. And that makes me think of this is, I think this is true. I mean, this makes me think of The Voice. And in different cultures, I learned American English, and we place my timbre in a certain place of my vocal range. But you go to different countries, and they place the timbre in different other ranges. Some are higher, some are lower. So why not, as you said? Why? Well, I'm this person, but I could just as well be more of this person. So does it all come down to choice and how aware we are of the choices that we have?
Yeah, that's right. Variety. Yeah, being aware of the variety seems to be a key factor in being able to adopt to another timbre, or another way of speaking. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
we're not really stuck in one way of communicating.
I think choice comes into it a ton actually, because, in a way, one of the things that our conscious minds enables us to do by creating connections is to connect the past to the present, or understand time at all. And and kind of, pre-conscious beings, may have innate, like, programmed in ways that they react to stimuli in the world, but we can actually sort of, because of the meaningful connections between the past and the present that we've made, that enables us, sort of what enables us to make choice. That, the humanity's freedom of choice, I think, stems from our ability to, see what has come before and use that to inform our things going forward. If that makes sense.
Yes, it
Yeah,
does. And we do have to be aware, though, that we have a choice. Like, we can look back at the past and say, oh, that was a choice I made, rather than there are some brains that think, well, I'm being buffeted about the tempest of life and I didn't have a choice. It's so interesting. It's so fascinating to wonder about that.